Welcome back to the Gun Collective Podcast. My name is Jon Patton. Boys and girls, as per usual, I know I say this all the time. You're going to have to get used to it. I've got another amazing guest this week. But before we get to that, I got to pay the bills. Go to vertex.com and use the code TGC. Get yourself a discount on an EDC bag, some apparel, and maybe some organization for your vehicle. I use it literally every damn day, and I love their stuff. vertx.com, and the code over there is TGC. Also, if you're into drinking coffee every day, I'd really appreciate it if you went over to blackoutcoffee.com/TGC and grab a bag of our Tenacity blend. It is a limited edition thing. We may not be doing this forever. Go get yourself some. Let me know what you think. It's got a little bit of extra caffeine. Alex, do you drink coffee?
Not for a long time. I haven't been
Alex
able
is
to,
off the coffee, but you don't have to be.
Yeah.
blackoutcoffee.com/TGC. Oh, and before someone leaves a comment about this again, Black Rifle and Blackout are not the same thing. blackoutcoffee.com/TGC. Alex, aka Control Pew, is on the show. How are you, buddy?
Pretty well. Been a bit frantic couple of days, but we survived. Finally here. Long overdue conversation about 3D printing and whatnot.
Oh my gosh, dude. I am so out of my depth when it comes to 3D printing guns in general. I think it's important for the audience to know that you and I have known each other for a very long time. How long has it been? Like 7-8 years?
Maybe something longer? Like that. We're coming up on a decade. I feel like we're almost
we're approaching a decade of knowing each other, and you have, while I've been working on TGC, you have been growing this like underground culture that I just never got a chance to touch on, and that is the 3D printing gun community. First off, let's start at square one.
Okay,
what the hell is Control Pew?
So Control Pew was sort of set up to do sort of media outreach and to talk to people about 3D printing guns, to get them started in 3D printing guns, to teach them what it's about, show them how to begin, and then sort of just let them loose and off into the corners of the internet with all of the other friends in the underground, to do totally not crimes and stuff.
Well, I mean, I haven't seen any legitimate crimes come out of that community.
Yeah, there really haven't been many, any at all. I think I can't, like, even the ones you'll see ghost guns in the news.
They're not a crime,
right? Well, that's not a crime, but like they're picked up in some arrest somewhere. They weren't ever used in a crime. They're just in the vehicle or something in the general vicinity, so the cops took them, and they're usually like a polymer 80 or something, as opposed to something
not
that
a 3D printed.
Yeah, right. And so, like, for the general like suburban mom crowd, we're splitting hairs when we say, oh, it's not a that's not 3D printed. But I mean, to us who are a little more educated, that's a pretty broad difference, in the skill it took to make the thing and everything else. So
you're kind of like a sensei, a tour guide of 3D printing, for lack of a better term. And I think it's kind of fascinating. For one, I think the community and anybody that's into 3D printing guns will absolutely agree with me. The community is a bunch of fucking weirdos. I have never seen so many like alternate cultures, like these guys that don't know, like arguably a lot of the guys that I have seen shoot 3D printed guns don't know how to shoot regular guns.
Yeah.
Like they've come at it from a totally different perspective, right?
Yeah. I can, there are dozens that I know of, like firsthand accounting, hundreds through second and third hand accounting of people who, they have a cursory interest in firearms because of pop culture and media all through their youth. They grow up, they become, adults, and they're like, I want a gun. But they go to a gun shop and the guy at the counter, boomer talks to them, and they get a little weirded out by that. And so they leave, and then they find our community and everything else. And then their first actual firearm they own is 3D printed.
That's wild.
Like, they 3D printed it. They made it themselves. and they're hundreds if not thousands of rounds in on this one print, and it's still running. It's their EDC, like on like, again, first-hand knowledge of dozens of cases.
You know what's funny is before that, like that didn't even cross my mind that that's possible, that there
Oh
are
yeah.
guys out there that never bought a regular gun and have
Mhm.
only ever 3D printed them. That's fucking amazing.
Yeah,
Like,
and I mean, it's they saw a thing, they thought, you know what, I don't know how to do that, but I'll figure it out, and then
sure.
they figured it out within the space of a couple weeks.
And they came to you for guidance a lot of the time.
Yeah. So back to the control pew, it was set up as a sort of funnel to take the vertical slice of people who exist on the internet and put them into this, that pass them all the knowledge they need to begin 3D printing a firearm.
Okay.
So
So
legal stuff, setting up
can
your
you give
printers.
us Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's just legal stuff. Whether or not I can do this within the confines of the law, just because it's always important to know where that line is. The technical knowledge of like how to set up a printer, how to set up your prints, where to find the information, and how to verify the information is correct.
Okay. So start us at the beginning for those of you, because I'm gonna bet that like 90% of the gun community has no idea that this is like a subculture that's growing rapidly. Can you start me, like, give me an example of how someone would get started? Obviously there's legal stuff, and
Mhm.
you've got that on your website, controlpew.com, right?
Yep.
.com.
Yep.
Okay, so people can go there
Exactly
for all
as
the
it's
legal
spelled
stuff.
right there.
Okay, and I'll put a link in the description of this. So go to your website, figure out the legal stuff, make sure you can do this. Then what?
Yep. And then begin. It'll cost to get started with the tooling required to make the most basic of 3D printable firearms. Going to cost about $200 to $300. We're talking about an Ender 3 off of Amazon, a handful of tools like a hex bits
Okay.
for putting the screws in, and about a $20 to $40 in PLA plus filament.
Okay, so you've
Um,
got the Ender 3, which is a printer, a
yep,
couple hex tools, which most people already have,
right.
and some filament,
Yep.
which is
So
the actual material that this stuff gets printed out of. And to be specific, PLA Plus is a type of filament that's a little bit stronger than regular PLA, which stands for polylactic acid. Is that correct?
exactly
Got it.
correct. That
Okay.
was more technical than I have anyway. But yeah, so PLA plus, little stronger than regular PLA, not as difficult to work with as like ABS or some of the more advanced nylon filaments, and also very cheap. It's $20 for a 2-pound spool,
Okay.
and a 2-pound spool will get you 6 or 7 Glock frames.
Holy shit.
So you can mess up quite a few times in the process of putting that together and still have room to spare.
Do you ever
Um,
recommend people do like test prints to dial in their printer
oh, absolutely.
before going to a full frame?
Yep. So we wrote a guide. It's theguide.controlpew.com. And it's got a quick start that will show you the quick list of tools that you may or may not need. And a lot of this stuff is optional. Like most of the stuff you will already have just
Yeah, but
generally around the house.
if you're a full-on nerd and you like most of the time when you're getting into something like this, you want to do it right, and you're gonna buy
Mhm.
the cool tools and you're gonna have all the gear because that's just how we are, especially
Right.
like if you're the type of person to want to do this, you're not a casual. You're just
Right.
not. Like, right?
Oh yeah.
come on now. We like when I get into stuff, I buy all the cool shit that goes with it.
Right.
Yeah.
What all I'm saying, right? You can spend as little as like $300. You could
Okay.
potentially spend $2,000 to $3,000 if you really want to go all the way, to the this is all I'm going to do for the next 10 years. I'm just going to 3D print guns, and you spend, if that's all you're going to do, $2,000 on a printer is not really a big ask. If you're just getting your feet wet and you're on a budget, and you might do one frame and maybe some other stuff, and you're sort of testing it out, see if you like it, spend the $200 on the printer.
Sure.
Because it's just a much easier pill to swallow to get you started. Um, But yeah, so the guide.controlpu.com has several other sections to it. There's a quick start guide that shows you everything: tools, equipment, filament, everything you need to know, brands to pay attention to, and where to get them.
Okay. So theguide.controlpew.com.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Um,
So is it I'm trying to figure out where the line gets drawn between somebody that likes 3D printing and somebody that likes guns a lot, and where they sort of start to meld together, because the amount of creativity that I've seen and the amount of iterative design that's come
mhm.
out of that community, I mean, it wasn't, I don't know, it was within the last 5 years that people were pissed about the Liberator. Can you explain what the Liberator is and then where we've gotten to from there?
So the Liberator was a firearm that was designed by Deterrent or Defense Distributed, a guy who works there. It first popped up in the news in 2013. Cody Wilson took it to a range and shot it in front of a bunch of 60 Minutes cameras, and everyone that's the sort of the time when everyone really started, like, it got into the mainstream media,
Right.
and the suburban moms started paying attention to that, and then the children of suburban moms who play like Call of Duty started paying attention to that.
That's
And
when
it's
I'm making them at night started.
right. So that it was not a very good gun. It was almost entirely 3D printable, but it wasn't at all reliable. It didn't work half the time, and it was a single shot kind of.
Okay.
It was not, as far as like firearms go, it was as rudimentary as you could get.
Right.
Um,
Intentionally,
in
though.
like, kind of. He was aiming at a thing, he was trying to address specifically the Undetectable Firearms Act,
Mm.
um, which was a downstream of of the polymer frame Glocks in the 80s, and he was trying to make a gun that fit within that specifically, so he could talk about it. But anyway, it was not a very good gun, and then they'd released several other models for like an AR-15 lower. They weren't done very well, and then aside from this, there's a whole community of people, hundreds of people on the internet who were already testing, designing, and building 3D printable firearms. So
Were
this is
they
going
pissed
on.
when he came out with this?
I mean, it's like anything else. You have a bunch of mixed emotions about it.
Mm.
Uh, People who understood enough to know what it was, to understand what it was and where the problems with it were a little annoyed that this thing that was, kind of garbage was getting so much attention.
Look
Uh,
at my design.
right.
Right. Okay.
The other section of the community was really excited because here's this 3D printed gun thing in the news, and now everyone's talking about it.
Sure.
So it's the Streisand effect, where like they don't want you to talk about the thing, and so you talk about the thing because it's, you keep getting told not to talk about it. Then you get more attention, people start joining, more people come in and develop. So it's a whole thing. Anyway.
So where would you say, so we've gone from this full polymer, I don't know if that's even, I guess, full plastic gun, full
Mhm.
printed gun, and we have now gotten to a point where we are seeing 3D printed metal being incorporated in some of the designs, in some of the parts. I mean,
Mhm.
can you explain one of, like, maybe a couple of the, like, up to date, like, cutting edge designs that you've seen recently?
Right. So, I mean, there's two sets of the 3D printing firearm world.
Okay.
The subculture has subdivided.
Oh
Uh,
boy, that's just what
so
we need. More confusion.
right, there's a group of folks who are designing and developing for like for platforms that take existing firearm parts. So we're talking about your 80% Glock frames, but not 80% anymore because you're just 3D printing it.
Okay.
We're talking
Okay.
about the Mac 11 frames because they're, you're printing out this one or two parts, and then you're dropping in your Mac 11 components onto that.
I see. So sort of using it to finish a
Right.
project where in the past that may have been a difficult thing.
Right. And so it's utilizing 3D printers to make the fabrication of this complicated frame part that would take, thousands of dollars to make molding and injection molding for, or, you know, hundreds of hours to machine it on a traditional like lathe or mill. And you're taking all of that and you're turning it into like a 24-hour print that you just click and do.
When you say 24 hours, you're saying that's like the actual print time.
Yeah,
I
the
want to
print
make sure
time.
that's clear.
Yes, the print time for like a Mac 11 lower is a day or two, depending on how you set up your printer.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so it's not short, but when you think about it comparatively, to build a Mac 11 frame from like sheet metal, that's like a week-long process
Oh,
in
wow.
a
Okay.
machine shop. Because you're sitting there with a mill, a laser cutter, a shear, and all these other tools, and you've replaced them all with this $200, $300 piece of thing that you bought off Amazon.
Okay, so we've got that subculture where
Right.
they're like finishing guns and completing them with interesting parts and different designs and tweaks and all that. What's the
Right.
other?
So the other side is sort of downstream of the FGC9, which was stands for the Fuck Gun Control 9.
Say that one more time.
Fuck Gun Control 9.
Okay.
So
and what was that?
So it was an entirely DIY-able, from the bolt, the barrel, the whole gun. You could DIY the whole thing in a garage in Malaysia.
Okay.
So we're talking about zero firearm parts. Everything that you need to buy is commercially available. So like springs, a lot of the springs in your
Wait. This isn't even using a gun barrel?
Yeah, you make it yourself.
Is there any rifling?
Yes.
This is amazing. This is amazing.
I'll get to that in a second.
Okay,
the rifling costs about the setup costs between $50 and $100 to do that, to build the to rifle your barrel and everything else.
Oh my gosh.
Basically, you buy a piece of tube off of AliExpress with specific dimensions, and then you 3D print an insert and you stuff it in there, and then you have an aquarium pump salt water through it, and then you feed it electricity and it corrodes the inside of the barrel. You're etching rifling into your barrel.
Wow.
Yeah. And so this was
wow.
The dev group started for this in 2017, I think, and then it had its first release in 2020.
Okay, so the FGC9 was a pivotal point in the 3D printing subculture, correct?
Yeah, it was the first time that like the promise of, oh my gosh, you can just make the gun, you can print the gun, sort of the hyperbole that the anti-gunners would spread about 3D printing firearms became sort of true, because it took no firearm parts, completely nearly undetectable to purchase and make, and you could do it for all in all US dollars less than 500.
Wow.
So that's printer, materials, everything.
That's amazing. Right. And was this something? So I know there, like around that time frame, the U.S. government and governments worldwide started getting a little butthurt that these files and this information was being spread worldwide. Was that like the real kickoff of the government going, "What? Wait a second! You're not allowed to do this," or was it before that?
I don't know. I mean, I still don't feel like the government has gone, "You're not allowed to do this. This is illegal." Okay. Because I feel like enough people have been in the making of their own firearms type activities for long enough that they know there would be significant outrage if they did. If that outright came out as like, you're not allowed to do this. Right. As far as the nickel and diming of our rights, that's been a thing for 100 years, sure, right, 250 years. So okay, I mean, I haven't really felt a change in the temperature of things.
I mean, you would know better than I would for certain. I mean, you're in it every day. So we've got the FGC9. That was pivotal. I can't say that word today. That was pivotal in like 2020 when that released. 3-year development cycle. And we are 4 years beyond that. Where are we at now? What's like the cutting edge now?
So cutting edge now, we've seen downstream growth of the FGC9 platform, so that's become a rifle, well, not rifle caliber, rifle length. It's still a 9mm. It's been stretched out into a rifle. It's been bullpupped. It's been reconfigured in about 15 or 20 different ways.
Oh my gosh.
And again, it's still maintaining that DIY ability. You can build the whole thing from the ground up. We've seen that branch off into 37/40mm launchers. So
okay,
yeah, we've seen that branch into, well, there's a development stream focused around this where they're trying to integrate a rifle caliber.
that brings a whole new set of challenges, correct?
Incredibly difficult, because it's, instead of a blowback 9mm, you're dealing with a much higher power, higher pressure, which means your the quality of your parts is different. The quality of your materials has to be a much higher grade. So
you're also dealing with gas pressure and gas volume that you just don't deal with in a pistol cartridge.
Exactly. And so there's a lot there to be figured out. They're still working through it, but it is ongoing development. We've seen development move into suppressors. So that's a sort of a downstream of like the gas mitigation problem.
Okay.
Where they're trying to manage all the extra gas, and then that sort of spiraled into suppressor development. So we have people making 3D printable suppressors that you could just score it out of your printer.
It sounds gross when you say it like that, but that's how it works.
That's literally it. It's a hot glue gun on a motion controlled hot glue gun.
Yeah, accurate.
Yeah. And so that's and we're continuing development. It's the great part about a decentralized community is essentially you have unlimited developers. Anyone who has an idea has absolute freedom to pursue it. So
the barrier to entry is much, much, much lower,
right,
when it comes to designing these ideas and these.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, if you guys out there listening have not seen some of this shit, I have seen some of the dumbest shit and some of the coolest shit come out of this community, because all it takes is some guy to go, well, fuck it, I'll try it, I'll design it. For instance, the Glock that conceals the grip, conceals the entire 33 round stick mag. I've seen that at events, and I think that is one of the dumbest things out there, and I want 6 of them.
Right. And you could have 6.
Right. You could print 6 of them.
Right. A $200 3D printer and like $20 in filament.
I don't think I could do the $300 printer. I think I would have to go, Bamboo Labs or some, I just can't have I am the type of person that goes, well, there is something better, so I have to have the better version.
Right. I mean, that's reasonable. That's, and the Bamboo Lab printers are really nice. The downside is it just costs more money.
Yeah, it costs more to have that fancy shit.
So, us being adults, and I don't know how old you are. I'm in my 30s.
I'm 40.
Oh wow. Okay.
Damn, I got the damn.
Yeah, no, I'm nearly 40 myself, but we're getting there. Anyway, $1,000 on a 3D printer, it's a deal. It's not a big deal.
Sure.
An 18-year-old college student, $1,000 on anything is life ending. So
yeah.
Therein lies the difference, I guess.
So we talked about designing, and one of the things that I've seen sort of propagate out of this community is communism, for lack of a better term. Like, it's fucking strange, because here we are at the core of the Second Amendment, making our own firearms, right? And I've seen people get upset about certain members of the community charging money for their designs, their files, or like making any money at all from this process. And it's almost like oh, you made a design, that's our design now. That sort of mentality. Why do you think that is?
So there's a general sort of base principle, which is to make a thing and release the thing so that the next person downstream can make it better. Right?
Okay.
And so if in the beginning, we had charged money for the AR-15 lower receiver, like the very first
When
model
you
of
say
it.
we, you helped design that?
No,
Okay.
we as in like the community collective.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know who
Okay.
actually designed it,
Okay.
because we're talking 2013. You know what I mean? If
Sure.
they had charged any amount of money for that, the whole thing would have died.
That's fair.
Right?
So it kind of
If
came
the
out of this communistic idea of sharing and
Very much
building
so.
off of that. And
Yeah.
now with the potential to make money, what is the general, like, would you say the community is split right down the middle? Like where do people fall on this?
I think most people are like, there are, so like I run a company in the space that sells parts. They're wind chime parts. Um, how do I
You
want to put
sell
this?
wind chimes that resemble other things.
Right. And you could use those wind chimes to make something else, but that's, uh not my part.
Oh
So
Jesus, you guys are so bad at this.
right. How do I put this into terms,
Yeah,
into
yeah.
words? I think it starts with the hmm. So I guess we have to come back to the base principle, right? It's what is the core thing that I need to pass forward so that everything can be improved, right? Because we're
Okay.
still, like, every time we turn around making improvements to frames, the the longevity of a frame, the durability of a frame, uh, of a firearm in general. And so if at any point you put up a paywall that says you can't have access to this, or it's going to you're going to have to contribute something beyond, you know like what you've already had to do, it sort of creates a barrier to the next person who comes in, right? So we're talking about that college student who's like, he's in an engineering college and he's interested in the stuff and he's really excited about it, but then he's got to spend $10, $20 to buy the frame, which also doesn't let you, like, which, with the licensing, if you're paying for the frame, there's usually something about modifying it and redistributing it.
I see.
So it comes down to, like, it's stifling that second and third level of growth.
That's got to be difficult to manage because at a certain point, I mean, I'm positive it's already happened.
Mhm.
I mean, people have tried to make money on the back of this community.
Oh, very much so.
Some justified, some not. I'm sure. I don't know the entire story, but I'm just speculating here. I I
I
mean,
mean, an example is so in the catalog, we host a beta
what is
program.
that? Sorry, what was that?
Sorry, the catalog is the sort of loose collection of developers who, one of them rather, who design this stuff.
Okay.
The catalog as a organization, as a group, has put together a pretty strict protocol for testing and evaluating new files, new frames, as well as like a documentation standard.
Huh.
So when you download a file package from the catalog, it will be complete, and you should be able to, in 99% of circumstances, finish that particular project, that build, completely without having to go to a group on the internet and be like, "Hey, how do I do this? What other
So that's
parts
a
do I
more
need?"
complete solution that you guys have sort of built.
Right.
Is that
So we
accurate?
we went we went from the end user perspective and said, "What does a brand new person need in order to finish this project?" And that's what we forced into every um, you know, every level of, or into every project that's gone through that release structure.
Okay.
So they all have, accurate documentation. They all have well informed, build guides and tutorials on how to put the project together. They all have where to find the parts and what parts you're going to need for this project. Because again, this is all very DIY. You're going to go to places like McMaster-Carr and Amazon and Walmart, and you're going to have 4 or 5 different carts of stuff that you'll have to buy from places to
Okay.
get parts together. Um, so
So
we've spelled all the information out.
so that's more of the sort of open source side of it.
Yeah.
What's the opposite of that look like?
The opposite of that is, well, a while back there was a group who was taking files out of our beta testing environment and then selling access to them via their own Discord channel.
Okay.
We've since had words and they've stopped doing that. but and they claim to have misunderstood uh part of the ethos and the motivation of the beta program and the community in general. But yeah, it was a moment in time where things were a little bit sketchy and tense. As far as
That's
like other
interesting.
yeah.
So they just like were like, hey, we're gonna slightly modify these and then sell them.
No, they were just straight up selling them.
Wait,
They
so they
downloaded the
basically
files.
stole and then
Yes.
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Did the community just like go into an uproar over this?
We handled most of it pretty quietly. It got a little bit public on Twitter, but most of it was done with DMs screaming at each other. um,
Okay.
so again, whenever we're having this sort of discourse, we try and keep most of it in a private space, just because it's a little more like, who wants to be involved in this?
Right.
In that level of drama. I don't. It's annoying. It annoys me in my DMs, but it's there. Anyway, yeah, so the catalog has a structured release and a standard for it, and a mandate that all of those files are free, right? So the catalog will never charge you for a file.
So at a certain point, I mean, this is just a giant continuing passion project that
Yeah,
no one is financially benefiting from, except McMaster Carr.
Right, McMaster Carr and Amazon. Creality, Bamboo, they all make a ton of money.
Okay. Okay.
So here's where I guess on my personal ethos is there's a couple ways where you could make money in the space where it's like not an outright like I'm not upset by it, right? And that's if you're selling a physical good, right? So if you're selling a Mac 11 upper, or a Glock slide,
or wind chimes,
barrels, or wind chimes, right? I'm not upset about that. If you're selling the files, I'm a little upset, but if you're the developer of the files, I don't really have a room. I can't really say anything about that. It's not my ethos at play that made that, right?
Okay.
And so if as long as if you're going to sell a file, as long as the developer themselves are making something out of the deal, it's I don't have any real objection. It's just kind of a weird thing that I don't like, personally. Yeah, so selling of physical goods is probably the only space where I'm like, yes, this is okay.
Okay. So
yeah.
Then my question turns to the idea of borrowing or straight up stealing mainstream designs and then iterating on them. So, for example, like something based on the SIG P320 or something like that. Where does that line get drawn with that community? Because at a certain point, you are going through copyright or whatever trade infringement nonsense. But because it's for personal use, like where do you guys fall on all of that? Like is it going to get to a point where a major manufacturer is going to sue?
Probably.
And what comes of it then?
We'll figure that out in court or something.
Boo. Boo.
No, it's one
you
of
hang
those
out with Matt too often. That's a lawyer answer.
Probably. No, it's like the P320. SIG doesn't control who can make a grip module for the P320.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Like
and
anyone
in fact,
can go to market
encourage
with
it.
Exactly.
With that particular gun, but other guns that do have serialized parts and things like that, like that's going to get interesting.
Yeah, no, for sure. If someone, made a printable frame for I guess that's the other part is like, there's no upstream source of the other parts of the kit, right?
What do you mean?
The other
Like
parts of the firearm. So like, yeah, exactly like High Point, right?
Okay.
If someone went to the commercial market and said, I have this High Point frame, and they started selling that frame and they made all the rest of the parts for the High Point C9, I'm sure High Point would sell them. or would sue them rather,
Oh,
not sell
sure.
them. But I feel like the line is when you come to market with a complete gun, and you it's weird because like it's so subjective on when someone decides to sue someone else over
Sure.
something.
But I mean,
So
in my opinion, you are an expert in this space, and I'm curious where this line falls because it's both a morality issue
mhm,
and a legality issue. Because at a
mhm.
certain point, somebody is morally fucking with somebody else,
Oh yeah,
and then legally that line is in a different location. But I'm trying to figure out where you fall on all this stuff.
yeah. Where I fall, I mean, I don't particularly care. It's one like I've been sent to C and D from several companies
Are
for
you allowed to talk
making
about them?
maybe let's say there was a company who made a pistol brace that was not very rubbery. It was very rigid, and it had a little foldy thing.
Okay.
And I made a 3D printable thing that you smashed on the end of a M4 buffer tube, and it also had a little foldy thing.
Is
And
that Tailhook? Yeah, that's the
yeah,
name of that company. Mhm.
allegedly. You
I
almost
said
got
it,
me.
you didn't.
Anyway, so they sent a C&D, and I mean the files were already released. I took mine down because that was, like not an outrageous thing.
And
Uh
as they say, you cannot stop the signal.
right. The files are still out there. They're floating around. I don't think that's made any dent in their particular product's bottom line as far as profitability goes.
The ATF made
Uh
a much bigger dent in that.
yeah, no, the government in the end will screw us all over. But yeah, I don't feel like it like it probably fucked with them a little. They had to pay their lawyer a little bit of money to send me a letter, like a whole $100 or something. But I don't think it did anything beyond that. Um I mean, High Point could have tried to send me a CND once upon a time over the first version of the Low Point, but they didn't.
Okay.
Because primarily, again, like we're out here, we're doing stuff, we're not really influencing one of these manufacturers' bottom line any. Because we're usually focused around parts that you can just get off of like Gunbroker or something,
Okay.
and that you would never find a frame for anyway. And the only real exceptions to that are things like the Mac, where they're we're engaged in manufacturing new parts for new uppers, new everything, and there isn't a copyright or a trademark or anything on any of that anyway. And the other one is Glock Gen 3 compatible parts, which are in have a massive aftermarket already. And then generally, like the people who are 3D printing a gun aren't necessarily the same ones who are going to be buying any of those guns to begin with from their original manufacturers, because they don't care
Right.
about them. They're not
Yeah.
interesting.
It's honestly it's all pretty fascinating. I think
Yeah.
we kind of deviated a little bit, and I want to get back to like where is the cutting edge now? You talked about suppressors.
Yep.
Are these polymer suppressors? Like what material are these being made of?
PLA plus nylon,
And how long
nylon
do they
6,
hold up?
nylon 12. Hundreds, if not thousands of rounds. I've had a Shush Puppy that I printed. Shush Puppy, it's a big it's like a 3-pound suppressor for 9 mil.
Okay, that is
It,
big.
it was one of the first entirely 3D printed ones. So it's all PLA plus, and then you use a bunch of threaded rods to sort of compress the whole thing together. And you're
Okay.
printing like 6 or 8 different segments for your baffles.
How
It's
do you
like
how do you
it's like
seal this?
I'm sorry.
How does it seal? Like how do you keep the gas in?
Yeah, so that's the threaded rods. There's 4 threaded rods around the perimeter,
You're
and then
just
you
using compression to hold it together, and
just
that's
compression.
good
Yeah.
enough.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
And it's I've had that thing since 2019, 2018.
When
I've
you say
taken
it's
it
big, can you give like a physical example? Like, is it the size of this freaking can? In
Uh,
diameter, or is it like?
so there's this, right? And then if
So
you
he's
just take
holding
like,
up a Stanley Cup kind of thing.
yeah, so it's like 3 inches in diameter, about 8 inches long. Uh,
We're not
yeah,
talking about. Never mind. Uh,
no.
so for context, a big rifle suppressor would be like an inch and a half. That's a
Hmm.
big rifle suppressor from a major
Right.
manufacturer.
Yep.
What is the cost of like making that particular can? Like rough estimate on cost of materials to make that.
$30.
Wow, 30
Maybe
bucks.
probably less.
I need to go buy a printer. I'm always lagging behind in technology stuff. Like I've got one of the desktop CNCs. I've never used it. It's just sitting here because I have so much other stuff going on. I don't want to dig into it and get lost in it.
Right.
But something in me says like I just need to go explore what this is all about. And what's even more interesting is with the advancements in printers that we're seeing, like the I don't know how to describe it, but I've dabbled in trying to understand that community as a whole, just 3D printing, not 3D printing
Hmm.
guns. And we've seen this meteoric rise in technology and advancements in the last 5 years. And it doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon. What have printers enabled us to do with guns? Like
So
how has that helped?
with the sort of arrival of the Bamboo Lab 3D printers, it has made printing in general get a lot easier to begin.
Why is that?
Uh, it's less it's as close to an out of the box experience as you can get with a 3D printer.
Got
It's
it.
all pre-assembled, it's all configured, it calibrates itself. You don't really have to do anything except hit the button. Um,
That's what I'm talking about. That
yeah,
sounds
so
amazing.
it's very plug and play, but it's $1,000 for like the entry level model. So
Well,
it's
you know what?
800.
I look at like an AR and I go, okay, AR or 3D printer. I don't necessarily want another AR.
Mhm.
I mean, I'll take one, for any manufacturers. Listen, I'm just kidding. That's
Right.
stupid. But the point is, like, it's not that bad when you compare it to things like that.
Right. I guess I still always answer that question from the frame of like an 18-year-old college student who's been eating ramen for a month, right? They're not in the realm of thinking about $1,000 AR yet.
No,
Um,
they're certainly
yeah.
not.
And just for like context here, I spent my first 4 years in 3D printing on almost exclusively Ender 3s. So like the cheapest 3D printer you can buy still even today is an Ender 3. Um, and so like it's entirely I've put out, I've made hundreds of guns on those printers and they've lived for, years, thousands of rounds, multiple shows and
Sure.
exhibitions,
So
and
so we've gotten to the Bamboo Lab stuff has really
yep.
pushed us into a new era where it's almost like Apple made a printer and made it easy, quote unquote, it
Mhm.
just works. Uh, and that has made the barrier to entry into setting up the printer side of things a lot
Right.
easier, right?
Yep. And on top of that, with the Bamboo Lab printers, it's made getting into nylon as a material a lot easier.
Why is that?
So nylon, it makes sense if you think about it in the context of like the more difficult a material is to print with, to make an object out of, the stronger that object will be in the end, right?
Okay.
Because you essentially you have to break the filament by melting it and then reforming it into an object, and that object is still going to be very difficult to break, right? Because it was more difficult to break the filament in the first place.
Okay.
So naturally, a nylon 12 is going to be a lot stronger than your PLA plus with two different filaments. Nylon is also twice as expensive, so when you mess up, it costs twice as much,
Hmm.
and you will mess up quite a bit. On an Ender
So
3, you're spending hundreds of dollars on this 2 pounds of filament, um, and it gets expensive. So by
and
making that easier,
why is it more difficult to print with? It requires higher temperatures, correct?
higher temperatures, it's a lot more sensitive to temperature around the print area. So as it's cooling, The rate at which the part cools needs to be sort of controlled.
What does that do?
So it'll cause warping within the part, and if you're stacking layer on top of layer, each layer is at a slightly different temperature, and so they'll start warping at a different rate, and then eventually you'll have a flat layer, and then the layer on top of it is sticking straight up because they've just come apart. So these are all problems that is sort of inherent in the material, and so with the bamboo printer, again, their settings, they've made it pretty easy. You can control the inside of the printer's temperature pretty accurately. They've built the machine in a way where it can handle that material relatively easily, as opposed to like the Ender 3, which is a very open frame. So if you have like the air conditioner on your house, it'll cause the temperature within your printing area to change, which leads to problems with your print in the end. So
that's wild.
They've built the machine with the forethought to control all the variables to make printing complicated advanced filaments easier.
And this is just another, as with 3D printing as a whole, this is an iterative thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen this technology increase. I can only imagine in 6 months to 12 where they will be as a brand, but other companies as well, because when I started exploring this, I started seeing all of these ideas, multi-material printing.
Mm-hmm.
For example, and I'm saying this for the audience, Bamboo has a system called the AMS, which allows you to print with multiple materials. However, it only uses one printing head, so it creates a lot of waste in that process. And then you have a printer like the Prusa XL, which uses multiple print heads, so you have drastically less waste, but it's got a much more complicated system because of multiple print heads.
Right.
I think that sort of stuff and these sort of explorations into what's possible for a consumer is really fascinating. And then one of the things I've seen a rise in the gun industry as a whole is using sintering. Have you dabbled in that concept at all? And can you explain what that is?
I have. So sintering is essentially it's printing on a powder bed. So your machine will lay down a layer of, like nanometer powder, incredibly fine powder, and then it will fire a laser at it to solidify a two-dimensional cutout of your three-dimensional part. So it's pretty much the same as FDM printing, except instead of a hot glue gun, you have a laser. And again, it's just stacking one layer at a time, 20, 30 nanometers at a time, going through your part and then solidifying a two-dimensional slice of it. And then eventually hundreds of slices later, you get to a final part.
I find the concept of sintering somewhat similar to resin printing. Are they? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's almost identical except upside down. So a resin printer will fire a laser at the bottom to solidify a layer of resin and attach it to the previous layers or the bed itself rather. But sintering in like a metal or a polymer powder, same process exactly, but from the top. Because it's using gravity
down, bottom up kind of thing. It's right. Very similar in concept.
Mm-hmm.
When I asked around about what printer was the best, and that I think I asked you in this,
mm-hmm.
I saw the resolution and the fine detail that was possible on a resin printer,
mm-hmm.
and was immediately told, no, don't do that. That's not the way to go. Why is that?
Resin as a material is a lot more finicky than a polymer. Resin is it's a UV curing material, so exposure to ultraviolet will solidify it more, and then after a certain point, it becomes really brittle. So if you print a handgun frame out of, do you want to wait for the dogs?
No, it's fine.
Okay, if you print a handgun frame out of resin, out of a UV curing resin, and you carry it around, you hold it in your hand, you go outside to the shooting range. Eventually, that material is going to overcure, become brittle, and crack.
So it's similar to like work hardening a material in concept, at least.
Yeah. Yep. Very much so.
So we've
And
got sintering, which is a different material as a whole because it's using a powder. It's not using that resin that can UV cure and get
right.
more hard.
Yep.
So where is the line between consumer and commercial when it comes to sintered products?
So currently, there are no consumer level sintering 3D printers. They
Why do
don't
you think
exist.
are they just too
It's
expensive for the
it's
laser and all that?
yeah, flat out too expensive. The cheapest one is from Form Labs. I think it's around $30,000 to get the whole setup.
Wow.
Yeah. So, eh, um,
That's substantial. I mean, that's
right,
like starting a business type cost.
right. And the next leg up, a better quality printer, but on that end more expensive. You'll see them used in like aerospace, NASA. Colleges will have them for their industrial sciences lab. It's like EOS and I'm trying to think of the other company. There's only two companies,
Okay.
and they're $500,000, $250,000 machines.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, I've seen the machines in person. I was at MK Machining in Missouri, and they've got an incredible setup. And they do metal sintering, which is flat out fucking fascinating that it's
Oh yeah.
possible. Can you expand on? So we talked about the polymer, like you can do like a nylon sinter, but what is like the metal? Like what types of metal are they using for that?
Really sort of higher end metals, so it's not going to be like your straight up carbon steel. It's going to be stainless, it's going to be Inconel, it's going to be titanium. Yep.
Okay.
So it's materials that are incredibly difficult to work with in a traditional machine shop. It's really hard to machine titanium.
And someone has figured out how to put that into
Right.
a powdered form and then
Yep.
create geometries that are just not possible.
Right.
Like for example, like a titanium sponge or
Yep.
something like that, where you literally just could not manufacture it in today's CNC mills. You just can't
Right.
do this. And you figured out how to make these really complex geometries. So how does all that trickle down to the 3D printed gun community?
I mean, it's a lot of the same. We're using the same sort of software tools to design parts. We're using obviously not the same printers and equipment and materials to make the parts, but at the end it's the same. The same skill set goes into designing the part as it does for all of these other companies, for the commercial industry, for aerospace, defense, everyone else who uses anything in 3D printing. The skill set to design is all the same.
It's absolutely incredible. You've actually started. We touched about it a little bit, but you've started a business adjacent to this community. What is the business that you've got going?
So there's Part and Trap is the gun company.
Say that one more time.
Part and Trap.
Part and Trap with a P,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
Okay.
It's the gun company that we are spinning up.
Okay.
It's in a similar vein, not quite the commercial, or not the commercial, rather the community driven 3D printing and design. It's a more corporate, obviously. It's going to have a more specific market sort of slice that it's targeting. Basically it's things that you can't buy.
Okay. Is there any of the? I know you're working on some stuff. Is there any of it that you can share?
Oh God, I wish I could. It's
okay.
A little too soon.
All right. Well, maybe we'll have you back on the show.
Yeah.
When
for
that
sure
comes on, because and I'm definitely going to talk about it on TGC News. I am. He has made me aware. I am not at liberty to share, but holy shit, there's some cool stuff coming down the pipe from these guys. So you've got that. You've got the wind chimes, which are definitely adjacent to this,
Mhm.
we'll call it. Um, I mean, what is this your day job at this point?
I think so, yeah,
I think
pretty much.
so. I fucking think so.
I don't know, man. You know how it is with like when your hobby becomes your job, it's just you're sort of all over the map.
Yeah, indeed, indeed,
So
indeed. So
between Control Pew, between a couple other things like the Catalog Foundation that's in the background.
what is that?
Um, it's the nonprofit we've set up to talk about 3D printing firearms to the
Okay.
general public. They're getting ready to publish a magazine, like a quarterly magazine,
Oh, for
like
God's sake, a
the old hacker
magazine?
magazines, right?
What the fuck?
We're having fun with it. Fuck it, why not? Um,
Okay.
so they're doing some stuff in the background. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of stuff happening.
It
Uh,
sounds like it, dude. It sounds like it. I mean,
I'm so bummed that I can't tell you more about the thing that we already
well,
talked
no, that
about.
I mean, people will just have to, go follow you on the socials
Right?
and all that sort of stuff. So if there is one core thing, like we've talked about a lot of different stuff, if there's one core thing that you want the TGC listening viewing audience to take away from this, what is it?
Uh, I mean, just start printing. Get a 3D printer and learn how to use it. It's not as difficult as probably most people think it is. Um, it doesn't cost a lot of money. And it's really just one of those things that you should kind of just know how to do because eventually you're just going to need it for stuff around the house. If you're handy at all and you make anything around the house, like just get a 3D printer. I have a lighting rig above my computer that holds like my camera and everything else. Most of that stuff is 3D printed.
Mm.
Is like good luck ever buying adapters for that. Uh, you know, I have like this is a little angled foregrip that I printed off for a gun that I needed one, so I just printed one out. I print grips for my guns all the time. I print
I mean, it's a different way
entire
of
guns all
thinking.
the
Look
time.
at that.
Yeah.
It's an
So
absolutely different way of coming at things, and it's creeping into daily culture
mhm.
so much more every day.
Yeah, and
I
the
mean,
best part of all of it is you can make silly stuff that doesn't exist. Here's a pick rail shovel handle stock for an AK that I made because why not? Yeah, just
oh,
stuff, man.
have you ever made an AK out of a shovel? I've always wanted to do that.
I don't think there's enough metal there to actually do it.
You just got to get a
Like
really
you
big shovel.
a big honking shovel, and
Yeah,
then
yeah. Come
you
on,
still
like
got to come up with like a barrel and stuff, and
well,
like
no, there's
you could.
well, I'm just talking about the receiver. I'm talking about the receiver.
Mhm.
You could take like a mucking shovel. I don't know what it's actually called. Like
Right,
one of those fucking giant shovels. There's probably enough material there. I don't know if it's good material.
right. Well, I mean, AKs weren't necessarily made out of good material.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Okay. Well,
More reliability.
how do people connect with you? You talked about the catalog. You
Yeah.
talked about your stuff. Give me some web addresses and social media handles to link people with you.
All right. So I guess first and foremost, controlp.com is the website that I put
That's
everything on.
CTRL Pew PEW.
Yep. The guide.controlp.com if you want the shortcut to getting started in 3D printing. So material, equipment, everything else.
Okay.
Thegatalog.com. That's the catalog, one word.com.
And that's gat as
Is
in, my gat
Yep.
gun.
That's where all of the files for all the different firearms that we dabble in get posted. Um, Again, not all of the files that have ever been done, just the ones that have gone through the catalog's testing and verification process. Um,
Wow. Okay.
and then, yeah, social medias. If you type in the social media network.controlpu.com, you'll find my profile because I get deleted all the time. So I just
Oh, that's good.
subdomained
Yeah.
them, so it's easy to find. Um,
What about
yeah,
Part and Trap? Is there a website yet?
not yet. Still in construction. That won't come up until basically until we have something ready to sell.
Fair enough.
The impetus, by the way, behind the company is we're not doing any pre-orders or anything else. If it's something that you see us talking about, it will be available for you to buy, or we've sold out of it already. That's sort of the rundown.
I think that's
No
fair. I think
pre-orders,
people
no
will appreciate that.
promises. Yep. I hope so.
Well, Alex, I mean, this is only scratching the surface. I mean, there are so many more things that I want to learn personally. I am so tempted to go buy. My problem with buying a printer is that, like, I'm going to buy one, and then in 5 minutes, a new one will come out, and I'll be pissed that I don't have the latest cool one. That's what's
Yeah,
going to happen.
probably.
Yeah.
That's
See,
fine.
see, it's not
No,
fine.
just accept it. No, it's okay.
except
Um,
except that you're not having the best shit. So
yeah, no, I think right now, like for the money, the Bamboo is hard to beat as far as like just
the
getting
X1
started.
Carbon,
Yeah,
yeah,
with the AMS, it's hard to beat that for $1,500. It's sort of, it became the Ender 3 for high end printers, so everyone is copying it and trying to do it better. They're not
yeah.
quite there yet, so I think it'll take them another year or two to get better. So that'll be the good one for now.
Well,
For a
at
while.
some point, we have not been able to do this at GunCon because of ATF issues. This was something we did explore, of having like a seminar, but I would love to try and educate the TGC audience more about this concept and about this community, because I think it's fucking fascinating. The amount of interesting stuff that has come out of it is incredible, and I thank you for the primer. Thanks for being on the show, and thanks for educating all of us. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
Rad. All right, guys, check out Vertex, VERTX.com. Use the code TGC and go to blackoutcoffee.com/TGC. Support us. That's how we keep these giant lights on. That's how those nuclear reactors behind me stay on. I really do appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next time.